At my college professor's wedding, my childhood buddies teased me. Your bond with Chloe is practically written in stone. You guys have been in love for 7 years, and you're still wearing those matching couple outfits to make the rest of us jealous. Are we going to hear some wedding bells soon? Before I could even deny it, Chloe let out a scoff. Who would want to marry a lapdog like him? The atmosphere instantly dropped to a freezing point. My friends awkwardly scratched their heads. I just smiled carelessly. I pulled out the wedding invitations written by my fiancée herself and handed them out to the stunned crowd. My fiancée is on her way right now. She handwrote these herself, and you are all welcome to attend our wedding. Holden, if you want to make me jealous, at least find a better excuse. You think you can fool me with some fake wedding invitations? And handing them out to everyone? I am so sick of your bullshit. Chloe snatched the remaining invitations from my hands. She tore them to pieces along with the one I gave her, throwing the scraps right in my face. Then she lifted her chin with utter arrogance. Holden, let me make this perfectly clear. Playing hard to get won't work on me. I'd rather marry a stray dog than marry you. I frowned slightly and wiped my stinging cheek. The slight dampness on my fingertips instantly ignited a fire in my chest. Chloe, are you out of your damn mind? In the 7 years I was with Chloe, I had never once raised my voice at her. I had always obeyed her every command and tried my hardest to satisfy all her preferences. I was constantly terrified of wronging her in any way. I was so used to acting like a servant. That was exactly what fed into her arrogant, self-centered personality. I didn't lower my voice, which drew the attention of a small group of guests at the wedding. Chloe stiffened her neck and screamed back at me. What did you just call me, Holden? Say it again if you have the guts. Seeing that I was losing my temper, a couple of our childhood friends quickly dragged us to a quiet corner. Holden, what is wrong with you? Today is Professor Miller's wedding. Aren't you afraid of embarrassing him by arguing with Chloe like this? A friend who was close to Chloe immediately took her side. Seeing my face darken even more, Brody stepped in to smooth things over. All right, let's all just take a breath. Chloe, when are you going to fix that fiery temper of yours? We all know what kind of guy Holden is. If you manage to piss him off, it means you really crossed the line. Chloe blushed with anger and yelled, Brody, did Holden pay you to be his hype man? If you dare take his side again, don't blame me for ruining our years of friendship. Chloe, myself, and this group of friends all grew up in the same neighborhood. We knew each other inside and out, and we were well aware of each other's temperaments. So, when Chloe said a few harsh words out of anger, no one really took it to heart. But the atmosphere remained incredibly heavy. Enough already. Holden, you must have done something to upset Chloe. Just give her a sincere apology in front of everyone, and we can move past this. Another buddy, Wyatt, chimed in to act as the peacemaker. Seeing that people were taking her side, Chloe became even more pretentious. She rolled her eyes at me, picking at the rhinestones on her manicure with sheer disdain. Oh please. I wouldn't dare ask the great Mr. Vance to apologize. What if he gets upset again and hires an actress to force me into marriage? I don't have time to play his little childish games. Her attitude made my blood boil. I shot back. Chloe, that is enough. Don't you forget that we already broke up a year ago. Broke up? Did you even bother to notify me? Chloe lazily lifted her eyelids and sneered in my direction. Our friends all went silent, looking at the two of us with helpless expressions. I knew that everyone, including my closest buddies, didn't believe me when I said we had been broken up for a year. I could only blame myself for being such a devoted simp in the past. While I was secretly fuming, Chloe suddenly snatched my phone away. What the hell are you doing? I demanded, reaching out to grab it back. She hid the phone behind her back and said mockingly, Didn't you say you have a fiancé? You must have photos together, right? I'll find them and show everyone. Then, she tried to unlock my phone right in front of the crowd. But after 3 attempts, it still showed an error message. Someone asked, Chloe, did you forget his passcode? Chloe said with absolute certainty, Impossible. Ever since he got his first phone, the passcode has always been my birthday. Everyone turned to look at me. I snatched the phone back from her and calmly explained, I changed it a long time ago. Useless things shouldn't be kept around. Chloe was about to throw a tantrum at those words. But just then, a gentle female voice came from behind us. Holden, what are you all talking about? I looked back and saw my beautiful fiancée Elena, walking gracefully toward me. The moment I saw her, the anger in my heart vanished entirely. I smiled brightly and opened my arms to her. Elena naturally wrapped her arms around my waist. Then she greeted my friends, who were all staring at us. I'm so sorry, traffic was terrible on the way here, so I'm a bit late. My friends all smiled and replied, No worries at all. Holden, aren't you going to introduce us? I looked at her with soft eyes and a warm smile. This is my fiancée Elena. Everyone politely said hello to her. Brody looked at her, then at me looking a bit surprised. Wow, these two are the ones actually wearing matching outfits. Elena smiled and explained, Holden designed them. When you put the cuffs together, it makes a complete heart. Saying that, she took my hand and pressed our cuffs together to show everyone. Right then, a highly inappropriate voice ruined the moment. Chloe mocked us coldly. Holden, do you really think you can trigger me by paying some random woman? Keep dreaming. I didn't want to waste my breath on her, so I directly leaned in and kissed Elena to prove it was real. Chloe's face instantly turned pale, but she continued to glare at us furiously. She gritted her teeth and yelled, Holden, you deliberately hired an actress to kiss you just to force me to change my mind? You are totally despicable. I pulled away from Elena, who playfully punched my chest with flushed cheeks. I lovingly tapped her nose before turning to Chloe with a freezing gaze. Chloe, you really think too highly of yourself. You are ancient history to me. But it was like Chloe couldn't understand human language. She firmly believed that this entire scene today was just an act I put on to force her into marriage. However, our friends didn't see it that way. With our childhood bond and an objective viewpoint, they could clearly tell that my feelings for Elena were genuine. Maybe it was out of pity for my 7-year relationship with Chloe. Or maybe it was because Chloe was still a girl they grew up with. Brody hesitated for a moment before saying, Chloe, stop throwing a fit. Holden is. He paused, then turned to me. Holden, you and Chloe were together for 7 years. Let's just drop this, or things are going to get really ugly. Chloe sneered. Let him act. I want to see what other cheap tricks he can pull out of his ass. My face instantly dropped. Elena is my fiancé and you guys are my friends. I don't ever want to hear those kinds of words from your mouths again. Or this friendship is over. Before Chloe could throw another fit, I decided to just rip the band-aid off. Chloe, since you won't let this go, don't blame me for humiliating you. I took out my phone, pulled up a photo from a year ago, and showed it to everyone. In the photo, Chloe was half naked, straddling a man. She was holding his head with both hands while he was working hard between her soft thighs. My friends were all utterly shocked. Chloe's expression shifted drastically. She desperately tried to snatch my phone. Delete it. Delete it right now. I easily dodged her and said loudly, You are the one who cheated first, and we broke up a long time ago. What the hell are you screaming about now? Wyatt suddenly spoke up. I remember now. I hosted a party at the club that night. Holden wasn't going to come, but I begged him to. I went to the door to greet him, and as soon as we walked in, we saw Chloe. Wyatt couldn't finish his sentence, but his testimony proved I wasn't lying. Chloe cheating on me was real, and our breakup was real too. I still remembered that day vividly. I had just signed a massive business deal, with a 5-figure commission. I was trying to figure out the best way to celebrate with Chloe when Wyatt invited me to his party. I hadn't seen the guys in a while, so I agreed right away and asked Chloe well in advance if she was free. Chloe promised me she would go with me, but when the time came, I couldn't reach her no matter how hard I tried. I completely lost my mood and just canceled on the guys. If Wyatt hadn't kept calling me a terrible friend for ditching them, I wouldn't have gone at all. But if I hadn't shown up that night, I would never have caught Chloe cheating red-handed. And I wouldn't have been able to climb out of that toxic abyss in time. At the end of the day, I was truly grateful, even though the withdrawal process of losing her was absolute agony at first. But now it was all in the past. After that night, I unilaterally broke up with her. I blocked her on every single platform and moved out of the apartment we shared. And Chloe never once reached out to me over the past year. Once, I was on a business trip and bumped into her at a hotel. She treated me like a total stranger and just walked right past me. I thought the breakup was a mutual, unspoken understanding. I never expected Chloe to be this relentless today. Chloe tried to talk her way out of it. Holden, you really are something. You conspired with Wyatt to spread lies about me just to frame me as a cheater. What do you even gain by doing this to me? I looked at her in absolute disbelief. I couldn't understand how such psychotic words could come out of the mouth of a woman I had loved for 7 years. Just as I was about to bite back, Elena gently patted my hand. She smiled and said, Holden, let it go. Since Miss Thorne doesn't believe a word you say, any further explanation is pointless. Who the hell do you think you are? You have no right to speak here. Chloe was furious and lunged forward to shove Elena. I quickly pulled Elena into my arms and blocked Chloe's attack with my arm. I said coldly, She is my fiancée, and she can say whatever she wants. Chloe, please stop making a fool of yourself. Seeing me carefully protect Elena while speaking to her with such icy hatred, Chloe's eyes instantly turned red. She looked at me pitifully, and her tone softened. Holden, I can forgive you for everything that happened today, but there's a limit to your tantrums. If you apologize to me right now, I'll let this slide. Seeing this, our friends also started trying to smooth things over. Holden, let it go. Don't hold a grudge against Chloe. And we all grew up together. There's no need to make things this ugly. Just shake hands and make peace. Wyatt tried to grab my hand and place it in Chloe's. I aggressively shook him off. Are you guys deaf to what she's implying? She still wants me to act like her obedient little dog. Why the hell should I? The atmosphere instantly became deadlocked. Chloe choked back her tears, raised her hand, and stepped forward to slap me. I tightly grabbed her wrist and viciously threw it to the side. Chloe, do you really think I won't lay a hand on you? Chloe stumbled back and almost fell, but Wyatt quickly caught her. Just before I could demand answers from them, Elena took my hand. She gently shook my arm and said softly, Holden, everyone is in a bad mood today. Let's just leave for now. We can host a dinner for everyone some other time, okay? I turned to look at her. Elena playfully raised an eyebrow at me, and I instantly cracked a smile. Interlocking my fingers with hers, I looked down at her warmly. All right, whatever you say. I nodded at my friends and was about to leave with Elena. Why are you kids hiding in the corner? The banquet has started. Why aren't you going inside? Professor Miller walked over, arm in arm with his wife. I stopped in my tracks and apologized. I'm so sorry, Professor. It's your big day, and I haven't even had the chance to congratulate you yet. It's never too late for good wishes. Thank you, my boy. The professor smiled and said, You guys were inseparable in college, and it's great to see you still sticking together after graduation. Holden, you and Chloe have been together for so many years. Don't forget to invite your old professor when you tie the knot. The atmosphere turned incredibly awkward again. I generously pulled Elena forward and introduced her. Professor, Chloe and I actually broke up a while ago. This is Elena, my fiancée. The professor widened his eyes in surprise. After congratulating me and chatting for a bit, he guided us back to the banquet hall. I couldn't really refuse, so I led Elena to our table. Chloe shamelessly sat down right on my other side. Elena smiled, signaling me not to worry about it. Throughout the meal, I solely focused on taking care of Elena and barely ate anything myself. Chloe watched us, loudly clanking her silverware against her plate. As the banquet was ending, she finally couldn't hold back anymore. Holden, you've taken this act too far. Don't be ungrateful. If you walk out that door without apologizing, don't ever expect me to forgive you. I ignored her entirely and gently asked Elena, Are you full? Elena nodded her head. Then let's go. I stood up, grabbed Elena's purse, and took her small hand in mine. Then, I looked down at Chloe with a commanding presence. Chloe, I hope today is the last time we ever cross paths. The heavy glass doors of the hotel banquet hall closed behind us, cutting off the muffled chatter, the clinking of silverware, and the shrill, suffocating sound of Chloe's voice. Outside, the late afternoon air was crisp and clean. A gentle breeze swept through the courtyard, carrying the faint scent of rain-washed pine. For the first time in hours, I felt the tight, burning knot in my chest begin to loosen. Elena didn't say a word. She simply kept her arm looped through mine, her fingers intertwined with mine, matching my pace with an easy, unhurried rhythm. We had barely made it halfway across the stone portico toward the valet stand, when frantic, uneven footsteps clicked sharply against the pavement behind us. Holden, stop right there. Don't you dare walk away from me. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, letting out a long, quiet exhale. Elena gave my hand a gentle, reassuring squeeze. Do you want to handle it, or should I? I'll handle it, I said softly, turning my head to look at her. I'm sorry you had to sit through all of that. You don't need to apologize for other people's bad manners, Holden, she replied with a faint, wry smile. Besides, I knew what I was getting into when I agreed to marry a man who used to have terrible taste. A genuine laugh escaped my lips. Just like that, the lingering poison from the banquet vanished. Holden. Chloe caught up, breathing heavily, her face flushed a furious, mottled red. Her designer silk shawl was slipping off one shoulder and the strap of her stiletto was slightly twisted. Brody and Wyatt were jogging a few paces behind her, looking thoroughly stressed and completely out of their depth. Chloe planted herself directly in front of us, blocking the steps to the parking lot. She ignored Elena completely, her bloodshot eyes locked onto my face, vibrating with a toxic mixture of rage, humiliation, and desperate disbelief. You're really going through with this? She hissed, her voice trembling. You made a scene in front of Professor Miller. You dragged Wyatt into your lies. You showed that disgusting fake photo to our friends, and now you're just going to leave with this woman? Chloe, I said, my voice deadpan and flat. Move out of the way. No. I'm not moving anywhere until you admit you're doing this to spite me. She took a step forward, her manicured finger pointing aggressively at my chest. You think you're so clever, don't you? You took one bad night. One mistake where I was completely drunk out of my mind, and you turned it into an excuse to throw a year-long temper tantrum. 7 years, Holden. You gave me 7 years of your life. You lived in my apartment, you drove me to work every morning, you begged for my attention. You don't just erase that with some cheap ring and an escort. Watch your mouth, Miss Thorne, Elena interjected. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't shrill. It was quiet, composed, and possessed. The kind of effortless authority that instantly made Chloe look like a petulant child throwing a tantrum in a grocery aisle. Elena stepped slightly forward, placing herself shoulder to shoulder with me. She looked down at Chloe, not with anger, but with the cool, clinical disdain one might reserve for a smudge on a window. First of all, Elena said smoothly, Holden didn't live in your apartment. Paid 2/3 of the lease and handled every single utility bill while you spent your entire salary on designer bags to impress people who don't care about you. Second, he didn't beg for your attention. He gave you patience, which you mistook for weakness. And third, Elena raised her left hand, letting the afternoon sunlight catch the emerald-cut diamond resting on her ring finger. This is not a cheap ring. Holden spent 3 months working with an independent jeweler to design the band. But even if it were a piece of twisted wire, it would still carry more dignity than you have ever shown in your entire life. Chloe's mouth opened and closed, her face draining of color until she looked almost sickly pale. You bitch. Who do you think you're talking to? Chloe lunged, her hand raised with long, sharp acrylics aimed directly at Elena's face. I didn't think. Instinct took over. I stepped in front of Elena, grabbed Chloe's forearm in midair and twisted it downward with enough force to make her stumble sideways onto the grass border. Holden, Brody yelled, rushing forward to grab my shoulder. What the hell are you doing? You don't lay hands on a woman. I spun around and slapped Brody's hand off my jacket so hard the sound echoed off the stone columns. And you don't let a deranged narcissist attack my fiancé, I snarled, stepping into Brody's space. Brody took a hurried step back, shocked into silence. In all the years we had known each other since middle school, he had never seen me look at him with pure, un'adulterante d'hostility. Holden, man, come on, Wyatt stammered from behind, his hands raised in a placating gesture. We're all on the same side here. We grew up together. Chloe was just emotional, she didn't mean to. Shut up, Wyatt. I cut him off, my voice dropping into a low, lethal register. For 7 years, every time Chloe insulted me, you told me to be the bigger person. Every time she flirted with other guys at your parties, you told me she was just being friendly. When I caught her with another man on your couch a year ago, you looked the other way because you didn't want to ruin the vibe of your little friend group. Wyatt swallowed hard, looking down at his shoes, unable to meet my eyes. You're not my friends, I said, looking back and forth between Brody and Wyatt. You're enablers who enjoyed watching me be her doormat because it kept the peace. Well, the peace is over. Delete my number. Don't come to my wedding. Don't ever speak to me again. Chloe had pushed herself up from the grass, her knees stained with dirt, tears finally spilling over her mascara. Holden, you're really choosing her over all of us? Over our whole life? I didn't answer her. I turned my back on the three of them, took Elena's hand, and walked down the steps to where the valet had brought our car. I opened the passenger door for Elena, waited until she was settled and walked around to the driver's side. As I put the car in gear and pulled away from the hotel curb, I looked into the rearview mirror. Chloe was still standing on the lawn, disheveled and weeping, while Brody and Wyatt stood 3 feet away from her, looking completely lost. I turned the steering wheel, pressed the gas, and didn't look back again. The following Monday morning, the executive suite at Vance and Sterling architecture was bathed in warm, natural light. I sat at my drafting table, reviewing the structural blueprints for a new civic library project in the downtown district. Across the glass partition, Elena was on a conference call with our structural engineering consultants, her voice steady, precise, and authoritative. When I had broken up with Chloe a year ago, I was completely burned out. 7 years of managing her emotional crises, cleaning up her financial messes, and suppressing my own ambitions had left me hollow. I had walked away from my old firm, taken my savings, and partnered with Elena, a brilliant senior architect, whom I had met during a commercial bidding project 2 years prior. We started Vance and Sterling from a 2-room rented office. Within 9 months, our designs had won 2 municipal contracts. And somewhere between working late-night design charrettes over lukewarm takeout and watching her passionately defend our structural concepts to skeptical city planners, I realized what it actually felt like to be respected by a woman. Elena didn't need a servant. She wanted an equal. She didn't demand obedience. She offered partnership. The soft chime of my desk phone broke my train of thought. Holden, you have a visitor in the lobby, our receptionist Mia said through the intercom. Her tone was hesitant, slightly uncomfortable. A Miss Thorne. Says she's an old colleague and insists on seeing you without an appointment. I paused, my stylus hovering over the digital tablet. Elena must have heard through the open glass door, because she muted her microphone, looked over at me with an arched brow, and gave a slight, questioning tilt of her head. Tell security to escort her out, Mia, I said calmly into the receiver. I don't have business with her. I tried, Mr. Vance mi whispered hurriedly. She made a scene at the security turnstiles downstairs, and now she's up here on the 12th floor. She's demanding to speak with the managing partner. I sighed, setting the stylist down. I'll be right out. I stood up, smoothed the front of my tailored charcoal blazer, and walked out. Into the reception foyer. Chloe was standing in front of the marble directory board, clutching a designer leather tote to her chest like a shield. She looked completely different from the haughty, perfectly groomed woman from the wedding banquet 2 days ago. Her hair was pulled back into a hasty, messy ponytail. There were dark purple hollows beneath her eyes, and her beige trench coat was visibly wrinkled. When she saw me step through the frosted glass doors, her eyes lit up with a frantic, desperate hope. Holden. She rushed toward me, reaching out to grab my sleeve. I took a deliberate step backward, keeping a 6-foot distance between us. Miss Thorne, this is a private corporate office. You need to leave before I have building security remove you for trespassing. Her hands hovered awkwardly in the empty air before dropping to her sides. Holden, please, just give me 5 minutes, she pleaded, her voice shaking, stripped of all its usual venom. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. Didn't know what? I thought you were working out of some dingy co-working space. I thought Elena was just some freelancer you hired to embarrass me. She frantically gestured around the high-ceiling, pristine glass office. I asked my father's business associates this morning. They told me Vance and Sterling just landed the $40 million Waterfront Cultural Center contract. They said Elena is the sole heiress to the Sterling Group, and that you're the lead structural designer. A cold, bitter amusement curled the corner of my mouth. So that's what this is about, I said softly. No, that's not what I mean, she stammered, tears instantly welling in her eyes. I realized I made a mistake. When you walked away on Saturday, I went back to our old apartment. I looked for your things, Holden. I looked for the coffee mugs you bought us, the notes you used to leave on the bathroom mirror, the emergency credit card you left in the kitchen drawer. She choked on a sob, stepping closer, her voice dropping into a broken, desperate whisper. Everything was gone. The apartment was freezing. The super told me the heating system broke 3 months ago, and you were always the one who called the repair crew. I tried to pay the property taxes yesterday, and the bank told me the account was overdrawn because I haven't tracked my spending in a year. Holden, I can't do this without you. I don't know how to live in that place alone. I looked at the woman standing in front of me. For 7 long years, I had believed that if she ever cried for me, my heart would break into a million pieces. I had spent countless nights lying awake in that freezing apartment, praying for the day she would look at me with gratitude, for the day she would acknowledge that my sacrifices mattered. And now here she was, weeping on the marble floor of my office, begging for my return. Yet looking at her, all I felt was a profound, hollow emptiness. She wasn't crying because she loved me. She was crying because her unpaid servant had walked away, and the harsh, unforgiving realities of adult life had finally come crashing down on her pampered head. Chloe, I said, my voice completely devoid of anger. Do you remember the night before our 7th anniversary? She sniffled, nodding frantically. Yes, we were supposed to go to that French bistro in Soho. No, I interrupted gently. You told me you had a corporate dinner with a client. I stayed home, cooked a 3-course dinner, bought your favorite white lilies, and waited until 2 in the morning. When you finally stumbled through the door smelling of cheap cologne and vodka, you threw your coat at my face and told me to draw you a bath because you were exhausted from dancing. Chloe flinched as if I had struck her across the cheek. I drew that bath, I continued, staring directly into her bloodshot eyes. I washed your makeup off, I tucked you into bed, and I sat on the living room floor eating cold steak by myself in the dark. And do you know what I asked myself that night? She couldn't speak. She was trembling from head to toe. I asked myself if this was how I wanted to spend the next 50 years of my life. Being an invisible ghost in a home I paid for, serving a woman who viewed me as nothing more than a convenient appliance. Holden, I was young. I was stupid. You were 26 years old, Chloe, I said, cutting her off with finality. You were an adult who made a conscious choice to treat someone who loved you like dirt. And you made that choice every single day for 7 years. The glass door behind me clicked open. Elena stepped out into the foyer, carrying 2 leather portfolios. She didn't look angry or threatened. She walked up beside me, handed me one of the folders, and placed a gentle hand on the small of my back. The city planning board just pushed the review meeting up by 30 minutes. Holden, Elena said softly. The car is downstairs. I nodded, looking down at Elena with a warm, genuine smile that reached all the way to my eyes. Thanks, honey. I'm ready. Chloe stared at the two of us. She saw the quiet, effortless intimacy between us, the unforced respect, the shared glance that communicated an entire conversation without a single word spoken. It was an intimacy she had never once offered me in 7 years. Holden. Chloe reached out, her fingers brushing the lapel of my blazer, her voice cracking into a ragged wail. Please. Just tell me what to do. I'll change. I swear to God, I'll go to therapy, I'll quit my job, I'll cook for you. I'll do whatever you want. Just come home. I gently, firmly reached up, took her hand, and removed it from my lapel. Chloe, I said, looking straight into her eyes for the last time. I am home. I turned my back on her, took Elena's hand, and walked through the glass doors, toward the private elevators. Behind us, the sound of Chloe collapsing to her knees and sobbing into her palms echoed off the marble walls of the lobby, but neither of us slowed our pace. 3 weeks later, the autumn rains had stripped the trees bare across the city, leaving the sidewalks coated in slick, golden leaves. I sat in a quiet booth at a corner pub in the Arts District, nursing a glass of dark stout. The bell above the heavy wooden door jingled, and Brody walked in. He looked around hesitantly before spotting me and walking over, pulling off his damp wool coat. He looked tired. The easy, swaggering arrogance that had defined his personality since our fraternity days was noticeably absent. Hey Holden, Brody said, sliding into the opposite bench. Thanks for agreeing to meet. You said it was important, I replied, gesturing to the empty glass. Drink. Just a draft is fine. I signaled the bartender, who brought over a fresh pint. Brody took a long, heavy gulp, staring down at the foam for nearly a full minute before speaking. I saw Chloe yesterday, Brody said quietly. I didn't react. I simply took a sip of my stout and waited. She got fired from her father's firm last week, he continued, his voice tight. Apparently, after you stopped handling her administrative filings and managing her project deadlines, 3 of her major client accounts fell through. Her father found out she had been forging your signature on technical design approvals for the past 2 years to pass regulatory audits. A dry, bitter laugh escaped my throat. I wondered how long it would take for that house of cards to collapse. She asked me for a personal loan, Holden. Brody rubbed his face with both hands. $30,000 to cover her credit card debt and keep her apartment from going into foreclosure. When I told her I couldn't afford that kind of cash, she went completely ballistic. She screamed at me in the middle of a restaurant, called me a useless parasite, and threw a glass of water in my face. He looked up at me, his eyes full of a deep, agonizing remorse. The second the water hit my face, I felt like someone had poured freezing ice water straight down my spine. Because in that exact moment, I remembered how many times I had watched her do that exact same thing to you. The pub was quiet, the soft hum of the jukebox playing an old blues track in the background. For 7 years, Brody whispered, his voice cracking, I watched her humiliate you at parties. I watched her make fun of the clothes you wore, the food you cooked, the hours you worked. And every single time, I told you to suck it up. Because Chloe was just high maintenance, and you were lucky to have a pretty girl like her. He grabbed his beer glass, his knuckles turning white. Wyatt and I, we were cowards, Holden. Chloe's family had money, she threw the best parties, and she was the center of our social circle. We let you take all the abuse because as long as you were the lightning rod, none of her venom was directed at us. We sacrificed you to keep her happy. I looked at my childhood friend. There was a time when hearing these words would have brought me to tears. There was a time when I would have given anything for my friends to validate my pain, to acknowledge that I wasn't crazy for feeling like I was being slowly crushed to death. Now those words arrived too late to matter. Brody, I said, my voice calm, level, and steady. I appreciate you telling me this. Truly. Brody looked up, a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. So, do you think with time, maybe we could grab a beer again? Maybe after the wedding dust settles? I took a slow breath, looking down at the condensation pooling around my glass. No, Brody, I said gently. We can't. The hope in his eyes shattered instantly. Holden, we've known each other since we were 10 years old. And that's the tragedy of it, I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. You knew me for 18 years, yet you stood by and watched someone destroy my dignity for 7 of them without saying a single word of defense. You only realized how toxic she was when the poison was aimed at your own face. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, and laid it neatly on the wooden table to cover the drinks. I don't hate you, Brody, I said, sliding out of the booth. And I don't hate Wyatt. But you belong to a chapter of my life that nearly killed me. And if I want to be the husband Elena deserves, I can't keep carrying the ghosts of my past into my future. Brody sat frozen in the booth, his head bowed, tears silently dripping onto the polished wood of the table. Take care of yourself, Brody, I said. I turned around, walked out the heavy wooden door into the crisp autumn rain, and didn't look back. Winter arrived with a blanket of pure, untouched snow, transforming the city into a quiet, luminous landscape of white and silver. On the third Saturday of December, the historic stone cathedral overlooking the botanical gardens was filled with warm candlelight, soft choral music, and the delicate scent of white gardenias and winter eucalyptus. There were 300 guests seated beneath the vaulted arches. Architectural partners, city planners, university professors, and close friends. People who respected our work, valued our integrity, and genuinely celebrated our happiness. Professor Miller was sitting in the front row beside his wife, beaming with pride, wearing a custom silk boutonniere I had hand-delivered to his office the week prior. I stood at the altar in a bespoke midnight blue tuxedo, my hands clasped loosely. In front of me, my heart wasn't racing with anxiety. I wasn't checking my watch, terrified of saying the wrong thing, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering someone's fragile temper. I felt only an immense, boundless stillness. A profound, unshakable peace. The heavy brass doors at the back of the cathedral swung open. The organ swelled into a magnificent, soaring harmony. The entire congregation rose to their feet. Elena stepped onto the ivory runner. She wore a custom off-shoulder gown of layered French lace, the delicate train cascading behind her like a river of spun moonlight. Her dark hair was swept up into an elegant, timeless chignon, and a sheer silk veil drifted softly around her shoulders. Beneath the veil, her eyes found mine across the length of the aisle. She wasn't wearing a haughty sneer. She wasn't rolling her eyes or picking at her manicure. She was looking at me with an expression of pure, radiant, unreserved adoration. As she reached the altar steps, her father gently placed her hand into mine. Elena looked up into my eyes, her cheeks flushed with a soft, beautiful pink, and whispered, "Hi, handsome." "Hi, beautiful." I whispered back, my throat tightening with a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. The ceremony proceeded with timeless grace. When it came time for our vows, I didn't need a written card. I held both of Elena's hands in mine, looking straight into the eyes of the woman who had pulled me out of the dark and taught me what it meant to be loved. "Elena." My voice rang clear and steady through the cathedral arches. For a long time, I believed that love was a debt you had to pay with your own self-respect. I believed that if I endured enough coldness, I would eventually earn warmth. But you showed me that true love is not an endurance test. It is a shelter. It is a shared blueprint, built with equal hands standing strong against every storm. Today, I give you my past, my present, and every breath of my future. I promise to honor you, to stand beside you as your equal, and to love you with everything I am, for all the days of my life. Elena's eyes shone with unshed tears of joy. She squeezed my hands tightly, her voice lyrical and steady as she replied, "Holden, you are the strongest, kindest, most brilliant man I have ever known. You gave me your trust when you had every reason to protect your heart, and you built a life beside me with courage and grace. I promise to be your partner in every creation, your shelter in every storm, and your greatest champion in every victory. You are my home, Holden. Today, tomorrow, and forever." By the power vested in me, the officiant announced with a warm, triumphant smile, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." I gently lifted the sheer veil, cupped Elena's face in both my hands, and leaned down to kiss her. The cathedral erupted into a thunderous, joyous standing ovation. Applause, cheers, and golden confetti rained down from the balcony as we turned, hand in hand, and walked down the aisle toward the light of the winter afternoon. Outside the cathedral gates, behind a row of snow-covered wrought iron railings, 50 yards down the street, a solitary figure stood in the freezing wind. Chloe Thorne pulled the collar of her worn wool coat tighter against the biting cold, her bare hands shoved deep into her empty pockets. She watched through the iron bars as the heavy cathedral doors opened and the wedding party spilled out onto the grand stone steps. She saw Holden. He looked breathtaking, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating an unmistakable, magnetic confidence, his dark hair dusted with falling snowflakes. And beside him stood Elena, her lace gown glowing against the white snow, laughing brightly as Holden wrapped his tuxedo jacket around her bare shoulders to shield her from the winter draft. Chloe watched as Holden leaned down, whispered something into Elena's ear that made her burst into a dazzling, radiant smile, and gently pressed a kiss to the crown of her head. A sudden, violent sob tore through Chloe's chest, burning her throat like swallowed glass. She remembered 7 years ago, during their sophomore year of college, when it had snowed just like this outside their dorms. Holden had stood outside her building for 2 hours in a cheap hoodie, waiting to give her a pair of fleece gloves because she had complained that her hands were cold. When she finally came down, she had taken one look at the gloves, called them ugly, and thrown them into a nearby trash can without a second thought. Holden hadn't yelled. He hadn't fought back. He had simply retrieved the gloves, wiped the snow off them, and walked her to class in silence. I'd rather marry a stray dog than marry you. Her own arrogant words from the professor's wedding banquet echoed through her mind, each syllable striking her like a physical blow. She had possessed a man who would have moved mountains for her. A man of brilliant talent, unshakable loyalty, and endless patience. And she had crushed him beneath her heels until he finally broke free, leaving her with nothing but an empty apartment, mountains of debt, and the agonizing, permanent realization of what she had thrown away. Down on the cathedral steps, the sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. Holden opened the door for Elena, carefully holding the heavy train of her lace gown so it wouldn't drag in the slush, his hand resting protectively against the frame as she slid inside. Before getting into the car, Holden paused. He looked up toward the snow-covered street, his gaze sweeping over the gardens, the iron railings, and the distant city skyline. For a split second, his eyes drifted past the shadow where Chloe stood shivering. Behind the trees, there was no recognition in his face. No chatriz, no spait, no lingering trace of the boy who had once lived to serve her. To him, the shadow beneath the trees was just another stranger in a city full of millions. Holden turned, stepped into the warmth of the car, and closed the door with a solid, definitive click. The town car accelerated smoothly, its taillights cutting through the falling snow, carrying them away toward their new life. Chloe stood alone on the freezing sidewalk as the winter wind howled through the empty branches, weeping into the bitter, indifferent cold until the last traces of their tire tracks were completely buried by the snow.